Welcome to Nerdist Book Club. Hi, everybody. We are live on Nerdist and Geek and Sundry's YouTube, as well as Geek and Sundry's Twitch. I'm Hector Navarro, and joining me, as always, are my wonderful, amazing co-hosts, Nerdist Editor-in-Chief Rachel Heine and Geekbomb's Maude Garrett. Hi.
Hi, friends. Missed your faces.
Missed your faces as well.
Now, so long, and it's been, obviously I'm really grateful and glad that it has been, and we've taken this week to just, process a lot of emotions. So happy to be back in with you guys, to be drinking, to be talking, to be sharing. I've already been in the chat. Everyone's a legend. Let's do this.
I love it. We took last week off. None of us felt really appropriate to get together and talk about Dune, a book we have very much been enjoying. And we decided to instead, Nerdist was wonderful. They were highlighting a lot of great Black voices and a lot of things that people can look at over the past week. And some things have changed, some things haven't. But we decided to get together this week for our community and to try to use this platform as we can. So we would be remiss if we didn't talk about it, if we didn't mention it, if we didn't say Black Lives Matter, and address what's going on right now in this country and around the world. So I'm going to hand things over to Rachel Heine, and she is going to tell us some cool stuff.
Yeah, the protests, which are ongoing, and calls for justice after the truly horrific murder of George Floyd and the systemic racism that is built into pretty much every aspect of American life. It's obviously a problem all over the world, but it is, we do a little history reading because we were not taught a lot of this in schools, which is also a part of that. But, after what we saw and how everyone has come together, Nerdist strives to be a place of inclusivity. We can always do better, and we will continue to do better. And there's always more work to do. We want to listen, to learn, and find out ways to help. So if you go to nerdist.com, you can check out, we have lists of resources highlighting, Black voices in our space and other spaces. We've also, something I'm sure we will end up talking about because it is book club, addressing some of the recent transphobic comments that have been populating this space online by a beloved creator. We want Nerdist to be somewhere where everyone feels welcome and can provide feedback. If you are a writer and would like to write for us, you can go to our About page, and there is a link there. This is ongoing. It's not a 1 week thing. It's right. It has to be, I think, a lifelong battle for us, especially as a white woman to, obviously I experience my own host of issues, and it's still nowhere near anything that people of color, non-Black people of color, Black people, queer, but there's just, we need to be kind to each other and support each other. And I'm very grateful for this community because I think that we try our best and hear from some amazing perspectives, both on the show itself, when we're talking on Twitter, on the Geekbomb after show.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you all for joining us. Thank you for making this a positive community. And you can always reach out to me. You can pitch us, and we're happy that you're here, and we'll keep doing our best.
I want to echo those sentiments. If you ever want to reach out to us, hit me up on Twitter. My DMs are open. Any way that we can help, any way that we can be as inclusive as possible, all are welcome here. We're talking about books, but we're also talking about how we feel about the world. We're talking about pop culture. We're talking about themes that are eternal. And I also wanted to give another shout out to the Geekbomb community, because 2 weeks ago, we had these amazing discussions in our after show that were not just about Dune, but they were about everything. Yeah. And I really want to shout out that amazing community and how open-minded and how much everybody was really trying and having a fantastic conversation. So Maude, thanks for putting that part of this larger community together. I really appreciate it.
Oh, that's nothing to do with me. They're just a really great group of people. You're seeing a lot of them in the chat already communicating. If you do want to join us, it's such an amazing place full of growth. And just to add to that as well, just some effortless things that you can do if you're wondering how to help. Follow Black creators online, because then you'll actually learn and be inundated with another perspective. Instead of sort of using your platform to share your version of the events, maybe it's better to amplify their voices and their concerns and what's going on in their lives, but also recognizing that, yes, white people are the problem, but we can also be the solution. And that is a really cool thing.
Absolutely.
And the responsibility is not on, Black people and non-Black people of color to change this. The responsibility is on those of us who benefit from white privilege. And, you don't have to be, it doesn't matter what your intentions are. There's no stopping point where you're like, okay, I'm done, fixed it. It's definitely, it should be a lifelong commitment that I think everyone here agrees with, that, our entire, every aspect of our daily American life, it seeps insidiously into all of them in ways big and small. And we have to be the ones to, again, listen, amplify, and make a conscious effort to confront some of those biases that you might not even know that you have.
And I also wanted to say, this is not an American issue. This is actually not something that is.
Of course, I just mean our actual.
For me,
true. Colonialism all over. Yeah, you're right.
What's really amazing for me to learn is that I always thought that was an American problem, and I was just like, I don't even know what you're talking about. That's like, ooh, sucks to be you, America. But in actual fact, and Dodo, reading Dodo Kiwi in the comments just said it as well. We all have our own issues as well. This is completely systemic. No one is exempt from this. This really is a global thing. Australia, I'm looking at you. Be better.
Absolutely.
So again, we love our community. Everybody's amazing. I also want to highlight one specific person from our community, from our chat. Vengar said, love Dune, hate this show. Welcome, Vengar.
So
welcome.
Glad that you're here.
We're so glad you're here.
Thank you for the laugh. That really that made me laugh from my stomach. And I laugh so hard that I hold my tummy sometimes, and you gave me that. So thank you.
We're going to try really hard, or at least I am, to try to win you over by the end of this episode. But on that note, let's get into the show. Thank you again to everybody at home for joining us. Oh yeah, we're going to get right to it. If you have never joined us before, this is our online live book club where we discuss all of our favorite nerdy tomes with you while enjoying a refreshing beverage. Speaking of refreshing beverages, we were sent some delicious wine by the Hideaway Wine Company. So if you're of drinking age, which is 21 and over in the United States and different ages around the world, and you want to purchase some wine online from them or even join their wine clubs, you can find them at thehideawaylo.com. Tonight, I'm drinking 50-50. It's got a bunch of skulls on it. And Maude, you're drinking the same one, right?
So this is I guess it's a 2016 split Cab Sav and Syrah.
Yes, from Santa Barbara County.
Any other way?
Syrah.
I've tried. Syrah.
Absolutely. Wow, this is great. I'm saving a real special bottle of wine for next week, which is going to be our last week of Dune, and we'll get to that later. But Rachel, what are you drinking?
I am drinking the Last Call, which is the bottles in the other room.
We believe you. All right, you know what? We should probably get back into this. Okay, so of course, everybody watching right now, you're as much a part of this book club as all of us are. So welcome to all of you who joined us today, especially Vengar. We're going to win you over. This month, we're tackling Frank Herbert's Dune. Thankfully, we've got these amazing hardcovers, these nice, beautiful hardcovers that were given to us from the fine folks over at Penguin. Our friends, I was going to say, they're our friends.
This one and also.
Beautiful, beautiful. So we've been reading it in style. This week, we're tackling the first half of book 3, which is called The Prophet. Final stretch. I can't believe it. When we started this, I'm like, this is many, many pages, but we're almost done. And before we get into this week, we have to do our previously on. And to check in with the chat, there's some great comments. Smarcy said, this book has been blowing my mind consistently from page 1. Every chapter I read, I kick myself for putting off reading it this long.
Me too. Totally agree.
That's awesome. All right, so let's do our previously on, okay? Previously on Dune. Book 1 of Dune covered the Atreides family taking over the fiefdom of Arrakis while dealing with political intrigue that eventually led to the death of Duke Leto Atreides, and Jessica and Paul, mother and son, being on the run. Book 2 of Dune dealt with Jessica and Paul learning more about their harsh new home and its inhabitants, the Fremen. Also, Paul and Jessica got their mind altering on. And that brings us to, we are now on book 3, The Prophet. First off, I was right about there being a time jump. 2 years have passed.
Oh, wait. Book two of Dune dealt with Jessica and Paul learning more about their harsh new home, obviously Arrakis. And its
Yeah, I said that part.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I missed
This is how good the wine is from the Hideaway Wine Company.
I too am 50-50. Half the time I am on it. Half the time, Lord have mercy.
It's beautiful to have backups when you're.
Vengar's already out, man.
Yeah.
You got left because of me. I blew it.
Vengar, come back. Vengar.
We don't know who Vengar is. We lost them.
Oh no.
Maybe
them, that's right.
Tell us. Let us know.
Vengar, let us know. Still love Dune?
Tell us why we suck. We're fine. We're adults. We can handle it.
Still love Dune? Still hate this show? Let us know.
Like and subscribe.
Yeah. Wesley Marshall said, I finished the book because I completely missed the line to stop in the audiobook and just kept going.
Did that again. That has happened to me like 3 or 4 times where I like panic when I'm listening to it and go, did I, because some of the chapters are like an hour and a half and some are 20 minutes. So it's,
and we stopped 100, I think we stopped an hour and 20 minutes into an hour and 40-minute segment.
Yeah.
Okay.
So an hour and 20 minutes in, that was the stopping point. So there's only 20 minutes left. So you haven't gone too far over, which is something that's good.
Yeah.
Well, this is fun. Lisa Hill in the chat said, watching you on my brand new TV that I just finished setting up just in time for the show. You guys are so big right now. Ha.
Don't look too closely at my face.
So we're in book 3. I was right about that time jump.
Yeah.
This section starts on Giedi Prime. Is that how we pronounce it? Is that what Frank has said in any interviews?
Someone's
Yeti, but not so much. It's sort of like yet. But I did find out that Atreides is 4 syllables. Atreides.
That's helpful to know. Thank you so much. So this is like Getty, like the Getty Center, like the Getty Villa.
Getty, like
Guillermo del Toro.
Like a G-U-I.
Guillermo.
Well, but the G-I-E, so Gieti.
Okay.
Yeah.
A little Italian.
The point is, Giedi is this section starts. We are on the Harkonnen or Harkonnen homeworld, Giedi Prime.
Harkonnen.
The Baron, our big bad here.
Baron.
Baron? Oh, it's confusing. This is why Vengar hates this show. The Baron, he dodges an attempt on his life by his nephew, Fade Rautha.
Fade
Rautha, thank you. Every single thing I'm gonna mispronounce. This is how I'm reading it, and you two chuckleheads are listening to the audiobook, correct?
But I also forget the pronunciation of half of them, even though I'm listening to them. What are you doing? Sorry. I have a new kitten, and they play they're playing a little intensely, so I just need to make sure the little one is not getting.
Just let us know. So with this section,
Harkonnen homeworld, Baron dodges an attempt on his life by his nephew Fade Rautha.
Thank you. How did you guys feel? Do you remember? I remember when we started this section. So, I have not loved the Baron stuff whenever we go to the Harkonnen world.
The first part I did, because it was an establishment of the Baron being this grotesque, evil entity. Yeah. But now in the middle, I was a bit like, because he was so stupid by like never seeing the Fremens as a threat at all. But then you kind of got to know the power game there. So the Baron was always at the top. He used Yui, got rid of him, got Thufir instead. And he's like, you can see him, playing the chess pieces in this game. What was really interesting in this part was that he was using Raban, the older nephew, basically as bait, because he first and foremost wanted Fade Rautha to step up and, rescue Arrakis. But what I really liked here is that 2 years later, you've seen kind of 2 things. One, Fade Rautha does not respect his uncle at all. He has gone from championing him, dedicating this, the arena match, the gladiatorial kind of stance, saying, my uncle is the reason why I am such a hero and why I'm so good, to trying to incessantly kill him. So Fade Rautha has learnt everything from the Baron and is now using it against him. What is also really interesting is Thufir Hawat is not necessarily the Baron's man.
Right.
Where he is
Thank
in
goodness.
yeah, right. So
I was really, I mean, I felt like he seemed so loyal. And I also, which we can get into in some of the later sections, but just that there are these Atreides people still trying to survive for revenge, for survive, you know, to just survive, whatever, you know, whatever their motivation is. But if they just knew that Paul and, well, mostly Paul, because they've got some conflicting ideas about Jessica, but knowing that Paul is alive would change so much of what they're doing. And I think it's one of those interesting cases of, and we've talked about this in many other books before, but when you don't necessarily regret what you've been through, even though it was really hard because it brought you to where you are. And I think in this story, that's especially true for Thufir Hawat and Gurney Halleck.
Halleck, yeah.
Who have learned so much and are, and as we get to the later section that we read, they're so primed actually in different areas of this conflict to sort of, you know, Cylon activate and do things for the Atreides family and for Paul because of where they ended up thinking that he was gone. And I find that really just good storytelling and structure, and also sort of follows that theme, which I always ascribe to, which is like, yeah, going through certain things is horrible. And some things do not apply to this, but they can help you become the person that you are.
Correct. I think I agree with Maude, where I really enjoyed the Harkonnen sections early on in the book because of what it was establishing. But I think maybe I'm just so invested in Paul and Jessica on Arrakis that I want to keep kind of going back to that. And you know, so there were
what could possibly be interesting with that is that the Harkonnens stopped being such a threat because you just spent an entire book 2 of them dismissing the Fremens as a threat.
Right.
So with that, it's like they no longer have that untouchable capacity that we have previously seen them as. Like Baron was always 3 steps ahead, and now he's absolutely blind to the biggest threat. And what I really liked about this book is that we kind of saw it earlier in book 2, where you realize that the Fremens were like, had a different sort of mentality. They weren't selfish people. It was for the betterment of the camp.
Right.
But that they were really ferocious. Remember how it was like, oh yeah, we killed 100 of your men. We only lost 2. Oop. And then knowing that the Sardaukar, who were supposed to be the be-all, end-all, best warriors in all of the galaxy, is now absolutely like doesn't hold a flame to the Fremens. Yeah. And I think that that's really fascinating as well.
Yeah. So I have a question for you guys too before we move on. I'm going to backtrack a little bit to talk about that section. To sum it up, the Baron wants Fade to calm down and stop trying to kill him so that he can put his nephew on the throne. And this appeals to Fade, of course. So here's the thing. The punishment for trying to kill the Baron over and over again is that Fade had to go and murder all of the pleasure women in the slave quarters. And then at the end of that section, or as we move on, we learn that there's a new religious leader on Arrakis called Maude, who we know as Paul. But that part about him sending his nephew to go kill all of the pleasure women in the slave quarters, we talked previously about how the Baron is almost cartoonishly vile with the things that they make him say and do and the actions that he orders his people to do. Are you worried that like that stuff's going to be cartoonish in this upcoming live action movie? Is it still going to be as horrific as it is? Because it's just so like classic villain mustache twirly. You know what I mean? Your punishment is you have to go kill all of the pleasure women in the slave quarters. And then we don't see that. Not that I'm asking for us to see it, but like, do you know what I'm saying? It just seems like such a, just a blanket evil thing.
You're seeing a power play here. And when it comes to, I guess it's not just like a small city's quarrels. It is, you know, the Emperor and the Baron is one another. So it is like a universal kind of thing. So I think they've heightened the ways that they are sort of punishing. But what the Baron is essentially doing is seeing that Fade is getting more and more of a threat and has to punish him and bring him back down.
Right. Okay.
And what we're also learning as the reader is that the more Baron uses, the Baron uses fear as his weapon, he will never ever gain loyalty. And the 2 people that should be the most loyal to him, for Howard, Fade, One's trying to kill him, one's trying to use his mind to basically cause an internal war and destroy them from the inside out.
Rachel, what were you going to say?
Oh, I was going to say number one that, when you're, you can come up again if you want.
Yeah. Pan.
No, it's Hup.
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 That's from Dark Crystal.
It is.
Other girl in the chat did say that she finds their disregard of life to be quite disturbing.
Okay. I'm just hoping that though, because I think when you read that in a novel, the disregard of human life, that can affect you. I think I'm maybe just worried I'm a little desensitized to that kind of like action in a movie, that disregard. So it's like
from Denis Villeneuve to read. Sorry, I gotta say it in every episode because it makes me laugh. Because I pronounce it terribly, but I hope that everyone, if not, you can go to Nerdist or Vanity Fair because that's the original piece. But if you want a breakdown of what we saw in the Vanity Fair piece, you can go to Nerdist. In that Vanity Fair spread, much like with all the Star Wars movies, where they show these amazing, beautiful photos from the set and kind of break down the first look at a film like this. Denis Villeneuve said that as much as I deeply love the book, I felt that the Baron was flirting very often with caricature. And I tried to bring him a bit more dimension. That's why I brought in Stellan, Skarsgård, parentheses.
The embodiment of evil, yeah.
Stellan has something in the eyes. You feel that there's someone thinking, that has tension and is calculating inside. I can testify it can be quite frightening. So I think he's going to, from just reading interviews and seeing what I have seen online, he's very interested, but it seems like, there's a delicate balance between adapting a beloved and iconic story and also making a good movie out of it. They're very different mediums. We've talked about this at length. I think that some films don't have enough of the character development and much like in the Harry Potter films, which we've talked about, where there are these important characters that might not have been important in the early books. Right. That by the time you get to the later books, it's really hard to develop them. In this case, I think that he's going to take, the main story, obviously, and a lot of the same beats. But I'm hoping that it also, there's so many sociopolitical parallels in these books, both when it was originally written and especially right now.
Yep.
So I'm hoping that makes its way into the film, where you're not so beholden to this happened exactly this way without, saying F the whole book,
Right.
So to add to your point, I kind of wouldn't mind just addressing things in the comments, because they have tried to kind of explain and divulge in why the Baron has decided to get Fade to kill all of the slave women. And Simone Cromer said that Baron hates women. As we know, one of the caricature ways that the Baron indulges is with young boys or young men.
Yeah, but I think even beyond that, I think he has a lot of disdain for women.
But he knows that Fade loves them, so he wants to scare him via this murderous test against women. Whereas Ms. Stay Peaceful says maybe the Baron is making sure that there are no spies within the women.
Sure, there's a bunch of different reasons. I think that all works in the book, and we hear that sentence, we read that sentence, and we're like, man, that's so evil, that's so brutal, that disregard for human life. And I am confident that an upcoming live action movie will still show him for the character that he is, without putting something in the movie that would make an audience member roll their eyes with like, oh, how corny, we've seen it a million times. But that's because Dune is so influential. And
I don't really like how they went to they did it in a very physical manner in the 80s Dune, where it was like pustules and this physically grotesque, like it was not, it's just sort of like a piece of the heart kind of thing.
Actually, I don't know if the original Hills Have Eyes. Game Wizard says, I heard Stellan Skarsgård will also not have a fat suit or suspender chair to help add the menace that the character could have. And I think that's smart.
It's about this. It's not about this.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Well,
Right.
it's again, it's a different time of writing style and everything, but I just think that's something that was, you know, a lot of things in Dune, as we know, have inspired a lot in pop culture.
Yep.
But some tropes are outdated, and that doesn't mean you can't bring the weight of a character or a story without, you know, pulling back a little bit from this. Mustache twirling was a good way to put it.
Yeah. Here's a great comment in the chat. Jordan Kamaski says, I've never had the attention span to read much in my life, but I made it my mission to finish this book, and it was amazing and sparked my new love for reading. On to the next Dune now. That's exciting.
Yay!
That's exciting. At this rate, Jordan's going to finish the whole series before this film comes out. And they're going to be caught up. So nicely done. And let's see.
Caught up. I'm not going to do it because we'll get in trouble legally. I need you all to know that was where my head went.
Apparently, there's wrong information about Stellan. Apparently, he is going to be in a fat suit. He said in an interview that he was in makeup for a long time because of the fat suit that he had to wear. So we'll see.
Interesting.
We'll see.
But in any case, it's probably going to be.
Still, I think it's about the portrayal of the character himself. We'll see.
Yeah.
But
it's just going to,
I already know that I'm going to read the next book because I love Aaliyah.
Yeah. And she is we've been told, major part of the rest of the books, which is very exciting.
She's like a witch with premonition that makes everyone uncomfortable. There's no way that I would not love that.
That's true.
A toddler having like fully fledged sentences and like, you know.
That's like the kid I like though, is the like weirdo who's like doing their own thing, and I'm like, tell me about the world you're in right now. I want to know about it.
Somebody think of the children.
Well, I want to get to that section because that was my favorite chapter of this part.
Yeah, me too.
Far and away, that was my favorite chapter. But before we get to that, let's sort of recover the Hawat Thufir section. Thufir. Hawat Thufir. He is, like we were saying, playing everything from all angles. Definitely playing both sides of the Harkonnens against each other.
Game of Thrones.
I don't know the reference, but okay.
Varys, you've seen Game of Thrones?
I've seen season 1. Yeah, it's pretty good. Pretty good show.
That's okay.
Old guy.
Yeah.
It's true though. It is very true of this sort of like, the person who collects all of the different gossips and stories and things.
Except Thufir is the master of assassins, whereas Varys was the master of secrets.
Gotcha. Meanwhile, Hawat realizes that the Emperor is getting ready to turn against the Harkonnens for creating conditions on Arrakis that could produce an army of Fremen as good as his Sardaukar on Salusa Secundus.
Sardaukar, and that's the best word to say. And even listening to the book, I was like, Sardaukar. I love it. But there is there's a prison planet called Salusa Secundus where the prison is in such harsh conditions that if you say, hey, you know, you can either serve your life basically behind bars or become this amazing fighter and a Sardaukar. And so that's how they kind of like create their army.
It's just like the Suicide Squad.
It's
cool.
It's also just such a lose-lose that
it's a little bit more like army, the army in Game of Thrones again.
Yeah, and also just the idea that they do get more status in this sort of imperial guard. I'm trying to think of the word. This empire strikes back. But it also requires that the conversations that they have about going to the planet and slowly acquiring Fremen to their cause so that they can sort of build them up and they turn against each other to show that, like, if you're a good Fremen, you can do this. And that to me was deeply gross, obviously, because they're evil, but just a very just relevant to humanity sort of story of trying to pit anyone who is marginalized or lower on a very unfair totem pole against each other to, you hear in, at least in my field in media, of women not elevating other women because of whatever, and it's a lot of
Right.
misogyny, or you don't have the power, etc. But I just hate that. I just hate that entire mentality of,
Mhm.
you know, I worked this hard to get here and you all have to do that. No, it wasn't fair then, it's not
why
fair
do we
now. Skip that.
why should we
Fuck
cancel
it.
student debt when I had to pay my student
Oh
loans?
my
That's not
God.
fair. Yeah, that's ridiculous. Yeah. Why should we cure cancer? We've already had people that have survived cancer. That's not
My
fair.
eyes will roll out of my head because
Yeah.
it's such a
Keep them in there. Keep
ignorant.
them in there, Rachel.
It's such no. It's such a selfish and ignorant point of view. I know. I was just thinking of Pan's Labyrinth. It's just such a selfish and ignorant point of view of not wanting to make the world a better place for others because you went through some shit. Like that's some bullshit.
Yeah, it is. So here's the other thing that happens in this section. It is revealed that the Emperor turned against the Atreides for creating a small fighting force that was as good as his Sardaukar. So what would he do to a planetary population that could match the Sardaukar? That's very interesting. And that's what potentially is happening on Arrakis, the desert planet, Dune, right? That's what's happening.
Yeah.
Hawat Thufir schools the Baron on how the Fremen are actually a threat to him. He secretly, and by the way, that whole section, Frank Herbert is such an amazing writer that conversation back and forth between somebody who has power and somebody who is of a lower status, but a lower status person being able to convince the person of a higher status, I'm not coming for you, but you need to hear me out. And that I'm just so impressed with any time that happens.
Took that? The Baron was like, he kept a mental check and he was just like, keep that up and I'm going to kill you.
Yep.
Know your place. He did not like to be challenged at all. Very reminiscent of someone else in power who doesn't want to admit that they're wrong. Doesn't like being challenged.
Too relevant.
Yeah.
Well, also, I think we've all probably experienced this, and I think if you are not necessarily the semi-traditional, white man in power, you change the way that you communicate with people in power and to, make them think that it's their idea or come across. And I've definitely done this, less so now, we'll see what effect that. I'm very pushy and say what I think now, but for a long time in my career would try to just be nice. Don't rock the boat. Don't, make them think it's their idea or whatever. The kinds of ways that you change yourself to, sorry. I know but it's just, and again, so much more so for Black and non-Black people of color or queer people, trans people, where it's like you're a different person at work than you are in your regular life. And that has nothing to do with professionalism. It has to do with fear of retaliation or being thought of as a bitch or,
you know what my new one is? I don't know if this will work for you, but I've noticed that I've started doing this, especially when it's like I'm trying to contribute or to help or to have an idea and it's completely dismissed. I start laughing loudly. Like I start getting the giggles and they're like, what? And I'm like, oh, it's just so funny because when I actually suggested something that we should talk about, you dismissed it. And I just thought that was really funny.
That's great.
That's awesome. And I wish I could, I wait. I try not to interrupt because I hate that when it happens to me in a meeting. And I wait until someone is done. And then I'm like, but back to the point, here's the thing I said again. But
it's a tricky balance trying to, and that's what I love about this story is that
it's well written.
It's so well written and it's all to an exaggerated degree. These are not regular workplaces. These are like, stabby in the backy Game of Thrones scenarios where it's life or death. I get it. And that exaggeration is really fun, but it still comes down to the thing I like about it is that I have tried in my life to be super nice to everybody, but it's a tricky balance of like, I want to be nice to everybody, but I don't want to feel like I'm getting taken advantage of. I don't want to feel like I'm getting stepped on. And so in that scene, Thufir Hawat is like, hey, don't abuse your position here. Don't step on me. Like, listen to what I'm saying, but I'm trying to help you, but I'm also secretly playing stuff. And then later we'll get to this section, but when Gurney Halleck is about to try to kill Jessica. And Paul walks in. That whole scene and how that was written, I was like, this is so good because it is life or death stakes, but it's just still also like when they talk about how calm Paul is to be able to get his point across so efficiently that Gurney's like, but no, trust me, I know that, like just that whole thing was so great.
I'd love to talk more about that dynamic, actually, how Gurney almost becomes like dramatized and Paul is so centered. That was really great. Yeah.
It was awesome. And how the thing ended with like, Gurney, just go get your guitar, man. Shut up. It's fine. He was like, okay.
Poetry.
Get up and you play.
Yeah. I was trying to kill you, but like, don't be mad. It's fine. Just get your guitar, dude. Okay. But we'll get to that section. So again, we're winding a little bit. Hawat, he secretly realizes that the Fremen tactics somehow seem similar to Atreides tactics. Now, it was him that realized that, right? Not the Baron. It was Hawat that was putting two and two together. The Baron decides to abandon Rabban on Arrakis, Rabban on Arrakis to try to keep the Emperor from bringing down the hammer. So he's going to abandon him there. There's some great comments in the chat. Chat is also freaking out about the kitty, Rachel. So you're gonna have to bring the kitty up again.
They're having a time by.
Hey Zell, no one loves you. Just thought you should know.
No, I love.
That's right.
It's
That's
just
right.
Loud and
Move out of the way, cute Zelda. We want to look at a cuter cat. Get out of the way.
Zelda's not a puppy anymore, so no one cares.
Yeah.
They're like crawling on the floor throughout the apartment. But they're happy. Come here.
All right. Next section we're in is Paul unstuck in time. This is interesting. So Paul is having trouble keeping track of when and where things have happened. This helps us catch up on what happened in the past 2 years for him and gives us a glimpse of what might be to come. He and Cheney have had their firstborn, Leto the second.
That was quick. Gosh. Hey, Paul, maybe write a dating book and let me know how Cheney can land this down quicker. Is it fate? Is she kill people? What do I do?
When you look as good as Timothée Chalamet and Zendaya, y'all going to be having a baby immediatamente, just instantaneously.
If you want one.
Instantly having a baby if they want one. A baby in the desert if they want one. And they did. They got right to it.
Baby in the desert sounds like my actual night. Like I've had nightmares like that.
Yeah. In your nightmare, you're like, what? I'm pregnant. What? I'm giving birth right now. No, I'm in the middle of a desert. That's just the worst.
Yeah, it's the whole thing.
I'll take it.
Even if you look up and Timothée Chalamet's like, hold my hand, let's breathe. It's like, well, that's a little bit better.
Very much like Timothée Chalamet, but he's
a little boy.
Tiny baby.
He is a unique actor in that I feel like him and Tom Holland are gonna look like they're 19 forever. Like it's like Call Me by Your Name was a great film.
You know what? They probably have their own personal nightmares about never being able to grow a beard. Okay, so
yeah, fair point.
Many of my dude friends who still can't get certain patches. It's a real.
I think that's sexy.
This is all I got. This is all I got.
Good
That's
beard.
it. That's it.
Hector.
Sorry, Steven.
I wish, honestly, we need to do one of these where Steven can just pop in occasionally.
Hop in. He's like, no. Yeah. What was I gonna say? I was gonna say.
We're talking about the 2 years that have gone by.
No, but also I want to say something about the movie Call Me by Your Name. Call Me by Your Name is a great movie. Yes. And the whole time I'm watching it, I'm like, Timothée Chalamet looks younger than he is.
Yes.
And Armie Hammer looks older than he. Because I didn't realize
he was 29 and he looked like he was 16.
Yeah.
I didn't realize.
Great actors, and it was an amazing movie, and I wept my
absolutely. But I didn't realize Armie Hammer's younger than I am in real life. I had to look up his age, and I'm like, what? Like he just turned 30 or 31. Armie Hammer. I shat you not.
I met him at South by Southwest for a movie he was doing, and he was delightful. Very tall. I'm very I get put off.
He'll be fine.
No, he'll be obviously. He's from the Hammer Empire and a very famous actor, but he brought in an entire tray of barbecue because he hadn't eaten it because he's huge. He was like, "Do we have like 10 minutes?" And he just like ate like 2 racks of ribs in like 10 minutes before the interview, and I was like,
wow.
Thank you so much.
I can imagine before each one he was like, Armie Hammer, hum, and just chomped it. Armie Hammer, hum.
He was very much like because didn't he grow up in the Bahamas? He was very much like, hey guys, like very chill. Like I would have thought Southern California, but maybe Bahamas.
When I interviewed Armie Hammer. I had a 10-minute interview with him. We spent 8 minutes talking about great coffee locations around LA. And I was like, I love you.
He's a dope dude, but he looks so much older. And
It's
He
a
almost
big
played
boy.
Batman. He
It's
almost played Batman.
He's a giant sort of man, which
Hi,
always.
Welcome to Book Club. We're covering Dune, and when we say that, we're going to be talking about Armie Hammer, why he's a legend, why he's awesome, and why he looks 5 years older than he is.
It's true. It's true. The Lone Ranger. He was good in the Lone Ranger. I didn't like that movie, but he was good, and he was almost Batman.
He was
Man from U.N.C.L.E.
He's good in Man from U.N.C.L.E. He'll be fine.
People.
He'll be fine. It's really good. Okay, so Paul is unstuck in time. He had a firstborn. He's got personal death commandos called the Fedaykin.
Fedaykin.
That's right. The Fedaykin. Chaney has killed people coming for Paul so that he doesn't have to waste time being challenged.
That was a really beautiful thing. So obviously this book always explores power. Who has the power? Who holds the power? How do you obtain power? And Paul, even 2 years after being inducted, I guess, as a Fremen, he's still really struggling with the rules of their culture and the power. And obviously the power here is that people are challenging Paul for his power because they don't feel like he should have that kind of power being a new person in the community, in the theatre. But then for Chaney to just be like, hey, some people are like trying to challenge you, so I just killed them. We're good, yeah? And he's like, what? Yeah. He's like, I just killed them. Because the more the people find out that I'll take them out and I will win, the less people are going to try and fight you.
Yeah, because they're like, oh God, this girl's going to beat my ass. And you're like, yeah, she is.
Yeah. So I kind of like that. She's been very much a love interest up until now, but now that she's a mother and a killer, that's like, okay.
Yeah, Chani was like, I killed him, and Paul was like, oh my God, babe, thanks so much. Oh my God, that's so
he
nice.
was confused by it. He was like, why are you doing that? And he still has times like, there's a line later on where he was just like, hey, Stilgar has noticed that I'm actually not on my game. I'm not at my best if I have to worry about you. So you get out of here so I can be my best self. And
yeah,
like,
it's very true. Also,
honestly, couple goals, like respecting each other's strengths, boundaries.
Yep.
I like it.
It's nice. It's nice. There's still a little bit of that sort of patriarchal, you know what I mean? Like taking a wife, that sort of thing. But we'll get to it because Jessica has a great moment at the end of this section.
Yeah, I really great. I think this section, we've so far, if you haven't caught this before and you're very lost, we've been covering this book for 4 episodes. The second part of book 1, I think, was one of my favorites. Book 2, I liked generally throughout, but didn't have those high moments. This one, and we're about to come to the conclusion next week when we finish the book, like this one I loved. There were so many elements that I thought were really interesting and exciting. And one of them was seeing that dynamic and seeing people's, not only their growth over this time jump, but just their growth from being on Arrakis and what they've all learned and how they have to sort of admit, like, maybe I was wrong about that thing.
Our one of our producers here in the chat, Lee, told us Armie Hammer's 33. Really? He's 33? I thought he was like 30. I thought he just turned 30 or 31 or something.
Yeah,
I may be wrong.
33. So he's
anyway.
We'll not talk about what he.
Another thing I love is right before Maude so beautifully broke that down, just before you started, right as you started talking, Maude, when I said Chani was killing people that were trying to kill Paul, you jumped in with was Chaney. That was so beautiful. That was lovely. And our producer Stephen was like, what? Because you said it was lovely that Chaney was killing dudes, and then you explained it. And so, yeah, well done. That was great.
I respected their dynamic.
Cosign. If you're living in the desert, you have to survive. You have to get married. I mean, look at
they knew what they were getting into. That is a part of their culture. If you challenge someone, you know it's to the death. They knew what they were getting into. She took care of things her way, their way.
And I love that Paul is bringing those sensibilities, also his own sort of history and culture. He's taken on so much of the Fremen, but the idea that, you know, some of his supporters want him to challenge Stilgar. I love that there can be this respect of different cultures and learning from both of them. And also looking at, gosh, I forgot her name, who is taking care of Aaliyah, who is
Oh,
Hera?
Hera? Yeah,
Hera?
Hara. Sarah with an H.
Hera?
Hera.
Hera.
Just the fact that she initially was like, well, I'm still, living in a society where your worth is sort of which man you're attached to, and
right,
means that, Chaney getting to kill some assassins, like, I would be if I lived in this time, I would be like, sign me up. How do I do that?
Does that mean she's claimed all of their belongings and their, spouses and kids?
Family is the word you're thinking of, maybe?
Well, when Chaney has killed all of these people challenging Paul, does that mean by killing them, she has then?
Good
you know
question.
What I mean? Like, is their brood just like tripling?
Because that's what happened with Paul and Jamis. Was that the guy he killed? Right? He sort of took that role. That's a great question. If we can have some Dune experts in the chat, let us know how that's broken down. That would be fantastic.
This is actually really interesting. Someone in the chat before we started, I read, they said that Jamis and Hera are going to be, I think, in this new Dune movie, Dune, they're going to be cast as Black people. And they were like, I'm really interested to see how that's going to go down. The scene where Hera is one and is a possession and is then passed around.
But
then that kind of refutes the fact that actually Hera was not with Jamis initially. Jamis actually won Hera off someone else.
And I know we mentioned this before, but Denis Villeneuve, the director of the new film, is basing a lot of this off of his love of the first version of Dune that he got, where the cover that he got in France when he was young. The cover of this sci-fi epic looked as though it was a Black person with the bright blue eyes. So he had always visualized all the Fremen, all the people on Arrakis, native people, as being Black or having dark skin. Zendaya is playing Chaney. Javier Bardem is Stilgar. So it's going to be a very
is the Duke.
Correct. Oscar Isaac. So it's going to be a very interesting. I'm also really curious about that too, because the book Dune already has so many metaphors for race and ethnicity and cultures and differences and acceptance and all of these different things. And to see, that's one extra layer that you get when you adapt something like that to a visual medium, because Dune, the book, hasn't so far explicitly said this character is white, this character is this. I think maybe they also say that overused phrase in fiction, olive skin. Maybe at some point some characters describe that way.
Always like olive or bronzed or
or even just this when Gurney Halleck encounters Paul again, and he
tan leathered skin.
He's been in the sun.
Yep.
So it's not necessarily. I think it's interesting to look at the casting and the story of Dune, which is, I think, great that we don't necessarily get any information about that, so that you are able to interpret as you should. But looking at in some sci-fi, when you see just a bunch of white people or whatever, and you're like, but this is a science fiction world. You're not telling me that, like,
the Harkonnens had orange hair.
But the concept that the future is and is becoming and should be so much less about that. And I'm very interested to see how that all plays out, because there are different characters on each side who.
And in any case, it's going to, that wonderful cast is going to add another layer when people see the film. And that's what I'm excited about. And what it's going to mean, I don't think we're going to be able to know until the movie comes out. Maude?
There's a comment here from the Matt Karen guy who says, find someone who looks at you the way Chaney looks at her enemies as she takes their water. Did we already read that? No. Good.
I don't think so.
You rule. Yeah, no, for sure.
Let's get back to the mother-in-law, who's got a whole bunch of issues of her own.
Yeah, so Paul is trying to move away from a jihad and a future of a jihad. And the more he does, the more certain it seems. Then we get to Jessica among the Fremen. She feels life in the Sietch is simultaneously alien, harsh, strangely secure.
So there is a moment in this that really resonated with me, and that is her in her little boudoir area, and the curtains kind of open, and a coffee is placed, and then leaves, and she was just like, "How did they know there is a spiced coffee? This is so delicious, and they know me well enough to not stay and chat, but just to drop off what I need and to go." And I was like, I am a better chatter.
I know. It's like, I want to see you, but in like very small doses.
Yeah. But the fact that they are like consciously on that level with I kind of like loved how he pinpointed that moment. I was like, get it loud and clear, say no more, fam. Yeah.
The spice has somehow like given the Fremen some level of telepathy, kind of something is kind of what they're hinting at, which is great. Aliyah, and that's how we pronounce Aliyah, right? Aliyah is basically an adult intelligence in a toddler's body, just like that Nicole Kidman movie Birth, which is really weird. Remember that movie?
No. Not the same. We're not going there.
She has been a reverend mother since birth, and people are afraid of her, and she thinks herself that she's a freak. Aliyah. Like Aliyah, yeah.
I was saying, God, that's what I'm thinking in my head, because if at first you don't succeed,
you got to get up and try again.
Get up and try
Dust yourself off and try again.
R.I.P. y'all. Also,
R.I.P. Amazing. Roma Must Die. Great movie. Hera loves Aliyah and will work to make sure that the Fremen accept her. Thank you, Hera. And
Hera's arc is really quite interesting because she's now seeing Aliyah as her own, and she's cherishing her. And the penny drops for Jessica to be like, "Oh wow, we really do need her. I saw her as an obstacle. I didn't know how she played into things, but now when everyone thinks that my daughter is a freak and she's obviously not behaving like a normal 2-year-old, Hera is defending her. So I need her on my team." So I thought that was a really cool moment.
Yeah.
I don't have a concrete. This is sort of it's not a half-formed thought, but I would like to open it up to the chat, because I think when we're talking about dynamics, whether it's in terms of race or identity or gender, and that Hera is taking care of this little girl on behalf of the Reverend Mother, and this sort of dynamic that is playing out there that I think historically we have definitely seen, especially in, the South in semi-recent history in the United States, of some incredible Black women who ended up in a position where either they were slaves or indentured servitude, which is the same thing essentially, but really caring for these kids that are the kids of the slave owners, and that sort of very complicated and upsetting dynamic, but also that, again, we're all human, and how do you not, even with the magical, freak witch of a baby who would make everyone uncomfortable, but that's why she rules. She just can't, she loves her, and she'll protect her, and she knows how to speak to her own culture about this. But
I didn't like her though.
That one put off alarm bells in my head of like, oh, this feels very of a specific historical time that I don't have the knowledge to necessarily comment on, but I would be interested to hear if anyone has thoughts on that in the chat. So,
Maude, what were you going to say, Maude?
So for all my Dresden Files fans out there, we're talking about it in the chat already. Terry made a really great point. There is a character in that series called the Archives, and she is basically the human storage and has all the knowledge of all the time within her, but she takes the appearance of a young child, a young girl. So it's this thing where something that is super, again, power, this one that possesses so much power because knowledge is power it always has been. But they are so vulnerable and like so innocent and so pure, but so powerful. And I think that is very frightening for some people, but then Hera is just like protect at all costs, and it clicks in for her.
In the chat, David Nichols Jr. said, Aliyah made me think of Baby Yoda, little super powerful toddler, right?
Yes.
And Miss Necromancer, Miss Necromancer said, I liked how Hera was like, Aliyah is a weirdo, but then wouldn't hear anyone else say shit about her.
Yep.
And I think that's what we're sort of describing, is that very interesting relationship. This was my favorite section far and away of this part of the book, my favorite chapter. I think that one of the benefits of putting a story out in a novel form versus a film or television or whatever comic book is that, like, and I guess it could work in a comic book.
Mom, you showed it, but I was like, what?
Go on. I'm
very excited about what you're about to say.
What is so great about having a novel instead of just a shorter film?
What's so great? No, not the length. What's so great is that you can write. You can write. This toddler speaks and moves like an adult, and that's what happens. As soon as you put that in a movie, you have to go find a kid actor. That's the challenge, right?
Or in the Twilight movies, you just make a weird robotic. What's her name? Esme. For all my Twilight fans out there.
To that point, can I just say that Kristen Dunst, I'll never get that
amazing.
Right. Thank you. Interview the Vampire. She was only something like 11 years old, and she possessed, that otherworldly adult nature, and that was her first.
In that movie with Brad Pitt.
First kiss. It's so weird. Also, they did this. They did the same thing in.
Not a gross kiss, just like a.
No, but like a. It's weird. They did the same thing in the show True Blood. At one point, they came across a vampire that was like a teen or like a young boy, but he was like hundreds of years old. Like, that's always fun.
Well, Armand in the books is supposed to be like also 16.
Really?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wow, interesting. Yeah. But all I'm saying is, it's so powerful when you read it in a book, because you don't have to overcome that challenge of, you got to go find a little kid actor that can channel like an adult grown woman, which is so weird and such a challenge. Also,
books, you can do something that's really cool. He or she or they thought all of these things, but never conveyed it. But you as the reader know it all.
Yeah, you can do that in movies too.
That in a TV show, because they'll be like,
with inner monologue, you can do it with inner monologue too. You can.
Sometimes that works, and also showing it through the writing of the movie. I will say, I brought this up before, but Girl on the Train, very fun book. Terrible movie.
Gone Girl, very fun book, very fun movie. They nailed it.
Yeah, or has she?
Girl,
where is she?
She gone. She gone, girl. She gone.
She gone.
Yep. She hated Ben Affleck so much. She gone. That was a great movie. Great movie.
Seriously, don't.
Yeah. Okay, so we can move on to the next section. I mean, I just thought that Aaliyah.
No, I would like to talk.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got a half an hour.
Okay.
I would love to hear why, especially, you liked the section beyond sort of the way that.
Well, because I think I'm bringing my comic book brain to it, and I love the idea of, because people keep saying this is sci-fi, this is sci-fi, this is sci-fi, and up to this point, one of the questions at the end of this episode.
No one's been saying, the whole thing from the very first hour-long chat we had about the first portion of the book was this is sci-fi fantasy. That just happens to
It's a space opera, which is like
space fantasy.
Totally.
But a lot of people call it sci-fi. I think our community recognizes that it's not, but it is known as like this dense sci-fi book.
Yeah. And I think that's one way to put it up next to Lord of the Rings without dethroning Lord of the Rings, by just being like, Lord of the Rings is high fantasy and Dune is the Lord of the Rings of sci-fi. But again, I think that with all of the concepts that Herbert is playing with in this world, one of them being this little girl was a reincarnate, like, it's so comic book craziness that it doesn't have a base in science fiction so much as it is like really forward thinking, maybe in 10,000 years people will be able to do this, will have evolved, whatever. What I'm saying is, I'm so used to reading superhero comic books where this shit happens all the time that I was so interested in how this character showed up, how the character was pretending to be a little girl, and then it like flipped it and was like, okay, I can be myself now, ladies, let's get down to brass tacks. Like, this great little interesting character. And it reminded me of, like, I read a comic book where the X-Men villain Apocalypse, who was played by Oscar Isaac in the movie X-Men Apocalypse, where at one point that movie came out, it's fine, it's no big deal. But at one point that character was like killed and reincarnated as an infant but then like same sort of thing, like characters came in and tried to raise the infant. It's almost like a baby Hitler scenario of like, well, I don't want to kill baby Hitler, but what if we took baby Hitler away from his timeline and raised him differently? What would happen? So it's just these crazy ideas that are so fun. And I was already drawn to it as soon as they explained what was happening. But then I also felt like Frank Herbert backed it up with an amazing scene of writing, just amazing dialogue between the characters. And another thing where it's like characters are speaking to one another with these life and death stakes, and yet they're able to convey information in succinct and direct ways that people get it. It changes characters. We see it happen within a scene just through dialogue. So this book might not have a whole bunch of action in it, but it is still so compelling because of how the characters are talking with one another and relaying information and how it changes themselves. So it's great.
I really like the moment where Aaliyah is talking about when she first was able to, like, when Jessica drank and how it affected her. And she was just like, I was just in this like little cave where I couldn't leave it. And I was inundated with this information that I couldn't process. And I didn't have any discernible way to kind of comprehend what was going on. I was just basically assaulted with knowledge. And it was like listening to this 2-year-old kind of explain her perspective and her story, and how, again, vulnerable she was in that moment, because no guidance, no teacher, wasn't even born yet, and was dealing with something that people don't go through for 19 lifetimes.
Yeah, and I think for me, and I'm gonna do the thing I do, but it reminded me of just inherited trauma. And I think that the fact that she even says, don't feel bad for me, I'll figure it out. This level of, just because you experience something when you're younger, I think it's just such a tough topic. But if you're taking it into sort of a real life comparison of, your parents can do or create terrible situations and still love you, and that balance is a very hard thing to, and it can be other authority figures or people in your life, etc. But just because this happened doesn't mean you can't see why it happened and everything, but that also doesn't take away from how hard something can be, right? So for her, I find it interesting that she is sharing how intense it was and what her experience was like, but also is aware that no one there really knew that this was what was going to happen. And it's not like they intentionally did it. It's not necessarily their fault. That doesn't mean it didn't have a huge impact and will on her whole life. And it's about this sort of balance of
cause and effect. It's everyone's seeing the effect and they're like, you're a freak, you're different, you're like this is weird. But then we're finding the cause of it. And you're like, oh, of course you're behaving like this, because the cause of what happened initially has created the effect. And it's kind of piecing that together. And I did like that moment.
Yeah. And also just that people can do things that are maybe not, if you are sort of waking up as you're learning all of this information in a million past lives, like besides the Bene Gesserit training and just everything that's going on with Jessica and Aaliyah, you could see that also becoming sort of a driving force for not wanting to be a part of this group. And, if we're talking comic books, like become an anti-heroine supervillain something. And
if we're talking Alias, it's like you have all this information, but if you could forget it, would you? If you had the capacity to
my God. Ugh.
That's a subplot in the TV show Alias?
Alias is
season 3, baby. I caught up.
I finished it this weekend because I did not sleep. But it is this idea that you can know why something made you the way you are and acknowledge that was a very difficult thing. And still not necessarily blame or hate the other person. Right. It's a really difficult thing. And Aaliyah is like a toddler and is like, I'm cool, I got it. That's aspirational, I think.
You're not going to like this comment, Rachel, but Lee Travis in the chat says season 3 of Alias isn't good.
It's not as good as the first 2 seasons.
Okay.
You know why? Because they do a 2-year jump as well.
Oh, I see. And that's when Felicity cut her hair. Is that when that happens?
The other JJ thing.
Wrong show. Okay.
I will absolutely have a multi-series hour-long chat about Alias, but
I think you need to take it to Instagram Live and have Lee join in so you guys can just be on Instagram talking about Alias. Yeah. That would be great. All right, so then let's get to the next section. This one was crazy, y'all. This is the crazy sci-fi stuff.
He went surfing, bruh.
Dude, he hanged 10, dude. Also reminded me of Beetlejuice. It always reminds me of Beetlejuice. Yeah. Paul, there it is.
Sandworm.
He rides a maker, which is the huge sandworms. While the Fremen respect him, the final test to become a true Fremen is successfully riding a sandworm. When he succeeds, many expect him to have to challenge Stilgar for leadership. And all of that was beautifully done too, because I feel the respect that Paul has for Stilgar, and I'm picturing Timothée Chalamet and Javier Bardem, who Javier Bardem is such an intimidating and amazing, beautiful presence. Like he, as a person, I got to interview him once in real life. Let me drop that name. Javier Bardem is somebody who is not, I would say, classically handsome. He's like Frankenstein handsome. You know what I mean?
We've talked about this on previous versions. I wouldn't even say ugly because he's not, but like sexy, weird. It's a weird.
And I sat down with him in person and actually talked to him for 5 minutes, and I was like, dude, I get it. I was like, I'm not gay, but Javier Bardem can get it. Like he can get it. He is so.
Pretty sure he already got it.
And Javier Bardem can still get it.
You got it.
Moment for me with Paul shredding on the sandworm, for me, was slightly predictable because we knew it would happen. This was like a righteous path for him to become the Fremen. He wasn't sweating it. He has the capabilities, and we've seen him time and time again exceed expectations. What was really cool for me, and if we're bringing sort of like our own personal perspectives into it, was thinking you've done the best that you can and going, yeah, mom, what did you think? And getting, could have been better. And that's what Stilgar does in this instance, where he was like, you went along the drum send and that could have been dangerous and you should have called in for help. But you were your ego was so there, that you could have jeopardized everyone.
And
so
he checked
don't
himself.
do that again.
Paul checked himself. He was like,
that was beautiful. In the last book.
And I think that was a really great moment because previously Paul has just been like, no, I know what's up. And this one, he could have easily, what is it in How to Make Friends and Influence People? The number one thing they say, never ever criticize someone because no one wants to hear anything bad about themselves. And straight away Stilgar's like, not praising, but going, you are actually really dangerous and your ego got in the way. And Paul could have been like, no, I'm good. I'm in charge. I'm the leader. But instead he goes, you're exactly right. It'll never happen again. And I liked that because it, again, was bowing down to a power battle. Even though Stilgar really has his best interest at heart and he's not doing it to belittle him, he's literally saying, you still have so much to learn.
Yeah.
And Paul going, you're right.
And that's the mark of a good leader.
And I was like, you guys just became a team.
Yep.
Yeah. It wasn't a battle of the ego, who's better, who's going to kill whom. Yep. And that's why I thought it was great in the next scene where Paul is just like, you know what? You guys have, your ingrained establishments and your rules here, but it doesn't have to be the case because if we follow your rules, no one wins. Mm-hmm. And I think that could have only happened because of the sand rider scene. So the actual sandworm riding, meh. The aftermath,
Agree.
Oh, interesting.
What it looked like in the film.
This whole section was definitely
does such great work.
Yes.
Making science fiction or aliens, etc. so real. Arrival, which I need to rewatch because it was such a cathartic cry the first time I saw it, and I feel like I need one. But it's the way that he's, you've seen all the interviews where he said, I spent a year, which I'm sure was at the same time he was working on other things, but like really trying to get the science and physicality design of the sandworms. And I'm just, after Arrival and Blade Runner 2049, I'm really excited to see that. And I also think it's interesting because after the first book, we were talking about Jessica kind of calling Paul out, and he has such a resistance to it. And I think that's an interesting just gender dynamic as well of this, still, which is understandable. Like you're in this environment, you're a duke, you're in a sort of patriarchal society already. But that with Jessica, it's like, well, she's going to cause the end of the world. Maybe she does, I don't know. But this resistance to her trying to check him in their fighting, when he's fighting and things like that, so he doesn't lose track of.
But notice the parallels between the Baron and Fade Routher, where it's like they're trying to kill each other. She's trying to protect him still. So she's having him mothering.
Exactly. No, I think her intentions are good and she can evolve.
She's also projecting, and there's a moment, the reason I was like, why does she hate Cheney so much? And it's like, yes, she needs to establish
that person.
Because she was never someone's wife. She was always put on the side for the political gain. And Cheney just swooped on in and she's just like, yeah, we're in love and this is how it's going to be. And she was like, no, there needs to be political gain. I was like
what we were talking about at the beginning of like, no, I went through this, so everyone should have to. And I think it's less, shitty than that. But also, I don't think Paul would have been open to, Paul would have been open to what is happening now with Stilgar if she hadn't laid some of those boundaries for him of, no, you need to take time to realize what killing someone means. Yes, they're all cheering for you, but this is important. And as a leader, you need to know the difference between when you should and shouldn't kill someone and learn from these. And I'm happy that Paul has come to that conclusion, but I was like, give Jessica a little bit of credit, even though she needs to change her mind on a lot of things.
She does. She admits fault.
She does, exactly.
Yeah. And that was really great redemption, where she was just like, oh, I was so blind by the fact that I thought what should be the case. I thought what should happen, and I didn't actually, I wasn't open to what could happen.
Which is what I think everyone should get comfortable with, because we should all learn.
Yeah. Rachel, every time you stop to look at one of your cats, I just picture like they're like balancing a bunch of plates on a stick. And you're like, look
at me, Mom.
And they're like, what? And you go, I'm doing a show.
That's basically what happened. The little one just went to eat food, so he's leaving Pan alone.
We've only got 15 minutes. I really want to go into Jenny.
Okay, let's do that. So here's what happens, right? Also, a great comment from Smarcy. Maude Dib knew that every experience carries its lesson. That's a direct quote from the book. Feels like one of the book's central themes is what Smarcy says. So I love that comment. So like we were saying, he's riding the sandworm. Paul and everybody, they're interrupted when thopters come nearby. It's Gurney Halleck and a smuggler crew looking for spice in the deep desert. Paul ambushes the smugglers, and we get a reunion between Paul and Gurney. Gurney realizes how Paul has changed, notes the difference between Paul and Leto. Paul cared, even though when he first sees Paul, he thinks he sees Leto, the ghost of Leto, which I was like, dude,
sun damage, it really does age you. Yeah.
Are you going to bring back Oscar Isaac for that moment? Because that would be cool. Paul cared about Paul cared about the loss of the carryall, where Leto would have cared about the loss of the crew. So some of the smugglers are Sardaukar in disguise.
I like that tie-in, by the way, because that was a really poignant moment in the first book where Liette is just like, wow, he cares about the people and not the property. The people and not the I just got caught up saying that. Oh, it's not about the property. It's about the people.
Yeah.
Get the hell out. Now Paul is blurring that line a little bit because he's becoming a schemist.
Schemist?
Don't you dare.
What? So then here's what happens.
He needs that balance, I think.
Balance is a huge part of Paul's journey with the Mentat and the Bene Gesserit, which is logic and emotion. With being the Kwisatz Haderach is about having all of the women's data bank. What else are you going to call it? Memories. And the Kwisatz Haderach gets the men's line. So it's that balance.
The balance of the sort of imperialism of me, and the Fremen of sacrifice, one for the cause. You can argue for either side or a combination of both, where it is about the greater good, but you also value, individual life. And I think that's where, when you see what's happening with Paul and Stilgar, where everyone's like, fight, fight, fight. It's like, no.
Why?
Yeah.
Nothing.
Some of those smugglers that Gurney had are Sardaukar in disguise, sent to kill Maude. And Rachel's like, that didn't work out.
Sardaukar in disguise.
So then we get to the next section, ways change. Paul tells the Fremen that he's not going to challenge Stilgar because he's not going to cut off his right arm before taking control of the planet as Duke. Instead, he anoints Stilgar as a leader serving him and calls for a council of other Sietch leaders. Am I saying that right? Sietch?
Yeah.
The Fremen learn to adapt to this new lifestyle Paul is presenting to them. Is Paul being helpful or is he being despotic? I think
that was interesting. I think that he was doing this to actually benefit the Fremen because Stilgar is held in really high esteem. Yep. But by law, if Paul Muad'Dib was to challenge him to a fight for power, like Stilgar goes, he's going to win. He's stronger than I am. Like that's a given. He's so small.
A great comment from R19 Shark 78 said, despite Paul's position and importance, he still had great respect for seniority, wisdom, and experience, which is what you were saying, Maude. Richard.
He said he wouldn't. He would say, "I'd get rid of all my weapons and let you strike me down."
But you wouldn't.
It's a good balance between both sides of this equation.
Yeah. Okay, so now we're getting back to Gurney, right? He's welcomed back into the fold. Jessica still wants a better wife for Paul than Chaney. What do you think of her attitude, considering that she was never married to Leto, so that Leto could always find a suitable wife? Yeah, that we talked about, and I love the moment where Jessica tells Paul, if you love her, be with her. And to, damn whatever the traditions are here, like if you love her, be with her. And I thought that was such a great moment.
You kind of know that deep down she's like, I'm just a reverend mother and I could have got a bit of Stilgar, but he didn't even choose me either.
I feel like he offered an open, like,
but then he reneged straight away, being like, oh,
to be like, but I get it if you don't, because this opens up a whole other host of issues. But like, Jessica could have gotten whatever she wanted.
Then Hera is just like, oh no, we've already planned things. If Stilgar gets killed or like whatever happens, I'm going to be Stilgar's next wife.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Good for you, Hera. So Gurney tries to kill Jessica before he's convinced that she wasn't a traitor. Paul and Jessica convince him and forgive him. And Jessica changes her mind after the attack. She wants Paul to choose his own path, even if that means marrying Chaney. And the section finishes with Paul preparing to attempt the Water of Life Reverend Mother ceremony that has killed all men who have ever tried it. Now, this I need to break down a little bit because I reread it a couple times.
We ran over the Gurney helipod. So quick.
You want to go back over that? We got time. Let's talk about Gurney.
It's really interesting with Gurney how, obviously he's going through a lot of emotions, but he's figuring it out as he's talking to Paul. So he's like, why didn't you tell me? Which is a great, I'm out here trying to survive. You left me high and dry. If you'd let me know, I would have come straight for you. And Paul was a little dismissive about it. And then, of course, Gurney's like, oh, yeah, of course, because if I dropped everything and left, people would wonder why, and they would follow you here.
Paul is living between the like Bene Gesserit, sort of what Jessica's thinking, and the Fremen, and thinking at this from a very strategic sort of chess player mindset. Whereas
realized he was a pawn on the board,
and not and now he's in a great position.
Yeah,
with the smugglers, as is hopefully Thufir Hawat. Because of that, they're in the right position, and I just find that interesting because I think there should be a balance between the sort of chess game stuff that is happening on both sides. Like one is part of the, imperial situation and one is the betterment of people, but they're both sort of using people for different, one is much more for good and more selfless. But I like to think, based on this section, that Paul is trying to take the best of both worlds to figure out a new path.
He took Gurney's power, though. I feel like by kind of dismissing, being like, there's nothing I could have done. This is exactly how it had to play out. That's why he doubled down so much with trying to kill Jessica, because he needed a purpose, because his whole purpose was taken away from him.
No, exactly. This mentality.
And he was like, I was wrong about that as well. So you've abandoned me. I was wrong about this. just end it. Honestly, do it. It was almost like a do us all a favor because he has absolutely no purpose. Like, just end it. And that's why, like, you're being silly.
He had so much shame for thinking that it could have been her that was the traitor, that's another reason he wanted that sort of honorable way out. And instead they gave him a new purpose. They said, go get your guitar, dummy. Go get your guitar.
Play us a little ditty.
Come and play us some Freebird. That's all we need from you. Gurney Halleck, who's going to be played by Josh Brolin. And that's going to be awesome. I could not stop picturing him. It was great.
I know.
It was
and
so
just
great.
Thinking of, I think it's going to be great. And I think that there is, and maybe in the other Dune books, it's like this too, where it is a back and forth between like sacrificing the many for one person and sacrificing the many for the betterment of the community. And is there a balance between that can let you have sort of your own individual feelings and drives and all of that without it just being, oh, well, you're water, or, oh, I'm royal, so I don't care.
Here's what I want to talk about. This last couple paragraphs. Paul pressed past the man toward the depths of the cavern, headed for the place that each such cavern had, a place near its water holding basin.
What page?
There would be a small, this is our page 538. There would be a small Shai Halud in this place, a creature no more than 9 meters long. What is that? That's 9 meters.
No, I just opened this up and it was in it. Oh, because it's the last page. Yeah.
Yeah. How long is meters to?
A meter is 3 feet, so this would be 27.
It's a little bit more than 3 feet. It's 3 feet and 10 centimeters.
So
this is probably a 30-foot sandworm, is what it is, right? A maker.
Oh.
Right?
Yeah, but I'm just afraid of that.
This thing is kept stunted and trapped by surrounding water ditches. The maker, after emerging from its little maker vector, avoided water for the poison it was, and the drowning of a maker was the greatest Fremen secret because it produced a substance of their union, the water of life, the poison that could only be changed by a reverend mother. So he's going to now try to drown this thing, and that's what's going to give him the water of life. That's what's happening, that there's a 30-foot...
balance again. With death comes life.
And also Jessica's power of turning poisonous things into something different is also, I mean, he either needs Jessica or Aaliyah to, that would be cool and scary.
I'm very intrigued. I'm very intrigued by how this section ended and what that's going to mean for Paul. Very, very curious. But I like what you said, Maude, where you said, you think so? From life comes death. That's very like Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi explaining it to Rey. That feels very, very cool.
Jedi is great.
He's been walking with so much confidence that it's just like he's walking in the direction and the path of the whatever fate is bestowed upon him. Like he's not even questioning things anymore. He's like, I am because I say I am.
We had before we wrap up, we had just a real quick question for you both. What things do you want to see wrapped up in this final section? Because this is it. That's our homework. Our call to action, our homework is we have to finish the book. And then next week, we're going to discuss the ending and our thoughts on the entire thing next week. Rachel?
I don't necessarily have a hope. I feel like, obviously, this has been a very well thought out book and story. So I'm pretty confident that the thing that I always hate in something like this is that there's sort of at the end where nothing really comes together. Not even a bow, but like a theme or a whatever. So I'm just looking forward to finishing it, and also everyone sending us new recommendations.
Oh, absolutely. Okay, so Maude, do you have something that you're really looking forward to?
Showdown.
That's what I'm talking about.
Well,
Baron.
He's gonna face off Raban.
Baron v. Paul. I want the Baron. I want him to kill the Baron.
Babe.
Yeah. I'm just curious.
He's gonna be sent to Arrakis and being like, I'm the king should know.
Right. I'm just thinking about the structure of this book into 2 movies and what that means. Stephen, very good point. Lots of baddies who need knifing. Agree.
Yeah, we'll see.
So Chris.
Chris Knife.
Chris Knife.
I want to thank again, and everybody here wants to thank Penguin for these gorgeous hardcovers, these gorgeous new hardcovers. Thank you again. Also, thank you to the Hideaway Wine Company for sending us some delicious wines while we read. like this one right here. If you are one of our viewers and you are of legal drinking age, 21 and over in the US, you can find out more about them at thehideawaylo.com. And you can check out previous episodes of Nerdist Book Club on Nerdist and Geek and Sundry's YouTube or Geek and Sundry's Twitch. Make sure that you like and subscribe. And I really want to just thank everybody for watching. I really hope that we were able to convince our buddy from the top of this episode who loves Dune but hates this show that maybe we're Vengar, hit us up. How did you feel about it? Drop a comment in the chats. Let us know. But huge thanks to everybody who watched tonight. Maude, tell everybody what we're doing next. And then Rachel, you can give us some more information on the resources. Maude, go.
Well, after the party, it's the after party, and we'll be doing it in the hotel lobby, aka Geekbomb's Discord. If you want to get involved with that one, head to patreon.com/geekbomb. Sign up to the lowest tier. It's just $5 a month. And with that, you get after show access, which means we all jump on a call, ask some questions. It's been a little inflated lately. We're supposed to be half an hour, and it's sometimes gone to 2. So we're going to try and, rein that in a little bit. And if you've followed anything that's happened in an LA County Zoom call, you'll know that you can yield your time if you wish to.
Amazing. Rachel.
But we'll see you over there. A lot of the big commenters that you have been chatting with in the, especially YouTube comments, they're in the after show as well. So we'll see you guys.
Great community. Great community. Rachel, let us know one more time about where we can go to find some resources.
I mean, just as a start on Nerdist, we have several resources, podcasts to listen to, books to read, whether, there's a lot of education that I think needs to happen for myself, for a lot of people. So Nerdist, we have a breakdown of some of the places you can learn. You can donate. We're accepting pitches. If you go to the About on our website, we have a pitch form that you can contribute to, and that's not limited to right now. That is limited to always. We want more voices on our site across the board. It's one of our main goals.
I've done it. Highly recommend.
Oh, yeah.
That was great. Anytime, Hector. That's such a good post to work on. And I just want to end with a very, very brief quote because I think it's applicable to what's happening in the world, and also it's from the book, you guys. So it's one of the openings from the Princess Irulan, and it's control the coinage in the courts, let the rabble have the rest. Thus the Padishah emperor advised you, and he tells you, if you want profits, you must rule. There is truth in these words, but I ask myself, who are the rabble and who are the ruled? I just thought that was extremely relevant to what's happening right now, and using power to enrich yourself and not care about others. And we can talk more about all of this.
I'd love to.
Also, chat is asking about the appendices, and we are right now officially going to assign it as extra credit reading. So go for it if you want to, but it's not necessary. Depending on how much time I have, I might get through all that as well for next week. So until next week, thank you so much for watching. Bye.
And send us recommendations.
Send us recommendations for books to talk about next month. We're so excited. Do that. Bye.